Delighted to welcome President Macron back to the White House. We've been together quite often, but not that often.
Well, EU Council President Antonio Costa intimates that Donald Trump should be calling him.
United States President Donald Trump's aggressive tariff war against Canada, Mexico, and China sent shockwaves through the global economy. Canada and Mexico faced a crippling 25% tariff, while some Chinese products were hit with duties as high as 60%. But the next target was clear: Europe. As world leaders gathered in Brussels, fears of an imminent global trade war surged. Would Trump's next move push international relations to the breaking point? Then came his boldest escalation yet, a direct strike at the European Union. "They've taken advantage of us for too long," he declared, signaling that EU tariffs were inevitable. Meanwhile, the United Kingdom found itself caught in the crossfire, scrambling to navigate the fallout. With global markets on edge, European leaders knew they had to act fast. And then a shocking twist. French President Emmanuel Macron took a stand that no one saw coming, not even Trump. His statements sent shockwaves across Europe, challenging the entire US-EU trade dynamic. What did Macron say that left even Washington stunned? And how did EU nations respond to his dramatic counterstrike? As European leaders scrambled to react, Macron delivered a bold warning: if the US escalates, Europe will retaliate. Speaking at the EU Defense Summit, he made it clear: if the US turns up the heat, we will respond in kind. Europe must assert itself as a global force. His defiant stance reshaped the conversation, raising one burning question: is Europe ready for an all-out economic showdown? French President Emmanuel Macron issued a bold call to action, urging Europe to deliver a stronger, more united response to mounting global trade pressures. He emphasized the urgent need to fortify Europe's industrial and technological infrastructure, boost defense spending, and implement a strategic economic shift to reduce reliance on foreign powers. Macron's aggressive action plan called for increased public and private investment, a complete overhaul of European Investment Bank financing, and prioritizing European industries in procurement decisions. His message was clear: Europe must act now or risk falling behind. In a move widely seen as retaliatory, Macron pushed EU nations to match France's expanding defense investments, warning that uncoordinated efforts would leave Europe vulnerable. With tensions rising between the US and EU following Donald Trump's escalating trade war, Macron's preemptive stance signaled that Europe was preparing for an economic showdown. French Industry Minister Marc Farac took it a step further, insisting that any trade negotiations with Washington must establish a clear power dynamic. He argued that an effective counterstrike must focus on high-value US products, ensuring that any European response hits where it hurts most. Meanwhile, François Villeroy de Galhau, governor of the Bank of France, condemned Trump's draconian tariffs, warning that they would fuel economic instability and heighten uncertainty. The EU leadership wasn't staying silent either. As discussions intensified, the bloc's foreign policy chief, Kadri Simpson, made a stark declaration: there will be no winners in this trade war. But with tensions at a breaking point, one question loomed large: is Europe truly prepared to go head-to-head with the United States? The looming trade war took center stage as European Council President Antonio Costa revealed that EU leaders were aligned with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte on a critical point: a stronger European defense would ultimately fortify transatlantic ties. Rutte pointed out a staggering reality: the United States profits far more from defense sales to Europe than vice versa. With billions already flowing and even more to come as European NATO allies ramp up defense spending, the US stands to gain immensely, giving Donald Trump an even stronger hand in trade negotiations. But Europe wasn't backing down. European leaders rallied behind Emmanuel Macron's hardline stance, signaling that the EU must take decisive action against US tariffs. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz reinforced this sentiment, asserting that the EU is powerful enough to counter any trade restrictions. Yet, he made one thing clear: avoiding a senseless and self-destructive trade war should be the priority. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk echoed this warning, stressing that Europe and the US need each other now more than ever. With Russia's aggressive expansionism and China's growing influence, internal conflicts could be disastrous. However, Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen issued a stark ultimatum: Denmark will never support economic conflict between allies. But if the Trump administration slaps tough tariffs on Europe, the EU will strike back with full force. Tensions are boiling over as European leaders call for urgent dialogue with Washington, fearing a full-blown trade war. But will diplomacy win, or is the EU bracing for retaliation? Irish Prime Minister Michelle Martin delivered a stark warning: protectionism hurts everyone, no matter where they live. He urged the EU and the US to work together constructively rather than escalate economic hostilities. Finland's Prime Minister Petteri Orpo echoed the call for negotiations, but shifted focus, stating that Russia remains Europe's biggest threat, implying that an internal trade war could weaken the West against external dangers. Yet, some leaders signaled a harsher stance. Luxembourg's Prime Minister, Luc Frieden, argued that tariffs should be met with equal force despite acknowledging their long-term harm. Spain's Economy Minister Carlos Cuerpo took a more measured approach, reaffirming that the EU supports free trade but will fiercely protect its industries to ensure fair competition. Across the board, EU leaders rallied behind Emmanuel Macron's aggressive stance, but with one key difference. While they preferred dialogue, Macron remained the loudest voice against Trump's tariff threats, warning that Europe must prepare for all possibilities. The rift between the United States and France has deepened, and Trump's latest tariff bombshell may be the final blow. But this tension didn't start overnight. From day one of his second term, Trump made his stance clear, signing executive orders to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement and the World Health Organization. Cold winds were already blowing, and France was right in the storm's path. Rewind to 2007, when Nicolas Sarkozy, nicknamed the American Sarkozy, brought the two nations closer, but that warmth quickly faded. By 2017, Trump's visit to France and Macron's push for U.S. climate cooperation already signaled cracks. By 2018, the gloves were off. Trump mocked Macron over nationalism, tariffs, France's World War II defeat, and even his approval ratings. The rift only widened with Syria, troop withdrawals, trade battles, and Europe's defense policies. Now, with Trump doubling down on EU tariffs, relations between Washington and Paris are in free fall. But here's the real question: who stands to lose more in this escalating war? Before Trump's tariff war declaration, the US and France had a booming trade relationship, one that thrived post-pandemic, hitting record highs in 2022. But by 2023, cracks started to show. Trade between the two nations plummeted by 12.4 billion euros, driven by falling energy prices, weaker French beverage exports, and declining cruise activity. Still, total trade remained above pre-pandemic levels, a sign of deep economic interdependence. The numbers tell the story. France's trade surplus shrank to 15.9 billion euros in 2023. Aeronautics, pharmaceuticals, and beverages fueled exports, but even those sectors saw major drops. Beverage exports alone collapsed by 1 billion euros, 20.6%. Massive declines in cruise and shipping sectors compounded the issue. Yet, through the ups and downs, France and the US maintained stable economic ties until now. As US-France tensions reach a breaking point, a pressing question emerges: will France turn to China for stronger economic ties? Recent high-level meetings suggest a major shift. Macron's 2023 visit to Beijing marked a pivotal moment in Sino-French relations, leading to 18 cooperation agreements across key industries. The focus? tighter economic integration, and a diplomatic push to address global crises like Ukraine. China's response, President Xi Jinping welcomed stronger collaboration, emphasizing the economic and geopolitical benefits of their partnership. Fast forward to May 2024, and the two leaders met again in the Pyrenees, solidifying deeper EU China relations. The key takeaways: France seeks strategic independence, but also closer economic ties with China. China prioritizes unity and cultural cooperation, strengthening its global stance. This partnership signals a broader realignment, not just between France and China, but within Europe itself. Historically, France and China have had a complex relationship, from 19th century trade dominance to mid 20th century tensions over Taiwan. But today, the tides are turning once again. France and China's diplomatic ties have seen decades of evolution, but recent years have forged a new strategic reality. Key turning points: 1964, France officially restores ties with China, setting the stage for long-term cooperation. 2004, the Franco-Chinese Strategic Alliance emerges, boosting collaboration in trade, culture, and education. 2015, the two nations joined forces on climate change, playing a major role in shaping the Paris Agreement. Macron's bold strategy. Since 2017, Macron has aggressively expanded France-China relations, prioritizing economic and cultural cooperation. His 2018 visit to Beijing led to major deals in nuclear energy, agriculture, and tourism, while also pressing China for fairer trade policies. Despite tensions over political ideologies, the two nations have maintained a pragmatic partnership. Even through global crises like COVID-19, France has remained committed to deepening ties with China. Economically, diplomatically, and strategically, France once opposed China's Belt and Road Initiative, but that didn't stop their economic ties from strengthening. By 2019, China had become France's top foreign investor, fueling deals across green finance, intellectual property, and civil aviation. The numbers speak volumes. Trade between France and China skyrocketed, with bilateral commerce expanding 800-fold since diplomatic ties were established. In 2023 alone, trade hit a staggering $78.9 billion, cementing China as France's most important trading partner outside the EU. Yet, France remains a critical bridge for China within Europe's economic framework. But there's a catch. France's trade deficit with China nearly tripled, from 1.1 billion euros in 2022 to 2.92 billion euros in 2023. That means France is importing far more Chinese goods than it's sending back. The implications? A deepening reliance on Chinese manufacturing and technology. China's top exports to France in 2023: electronics, machinery, energy components, furniture, vehicles, and even mystery goods, a list that underscores France's growing dependency. Meanwhile, international trade databases suggest China's imports from France are shifting, hinting at a potential recalibration in their economic ties. Now, here's the real kicker. With Donald Trump ramping up tariff threats against Europe, France has an escape route: China. Macron's forceful rhetoric signals a major pivot. If U.S. tariffs hit, France may double down on its trade with Beijing. For Washington and Brussels, this is a direct challenge. Experts warn that escalating the tariff war could push Europe closer to China, an outcome the US and EU might regret. The big question: will this crisis be resolved through diplomacy, or are we on the brink of an economic realignment with global consequences? What happens next could change everything.